That's why it's all really important. As I work through the framework with clients, you can't just focus on margin, or you can't just focus on top line revenue, or you can't even just focus on net profit. It all works together, those 5 components on a profit and loss. And so you have to have the sales goals as the basis for everything, and then back into that. And the same thing is with, forecasting what you're going to need in inventory. What's your goal?
Everybody, today I have Ciara Stockeland, who is a profit strategist and also a 3 times Ironman athlete, which is wildly impressive to me because I would drown, I feel like, with some of the distance and the things that you have to do. But Ciara, I'm so excited to bring Ciara on for a couple reasons. First, she's super bubbly and super fun. Her personality is just like really, really positive. And I love to have really positive, bubbly people on here. But then also, she specializes in the thing that most people don't want to talk about, and that is money. And talking about money is something that is so critical. It's one of the largest reasons businesses fail. And it's one of the greatest bottlenecks we have when we're trying to especially prepare for things like the holidays, right? When we're trying to forecast and we're trying to get our cash under wraps and make sure that we're really, really prepared. And when it comes to inventory and things like that. So in a very serendipitous way, I had Ciara on my list to have on this podcast for several months to talk about this. And then we ended up getting introduced over email like a month ago. And I'm like, this is wonderful. Now I don't have to cold reach out to Ciara. So Ciara, thank you for joining me on this podcast.
Yeah. And when you responded to that email introduction, our mutual friend introduced us, and you literally screenshotted that my name was on your list. I was like, that's pretty cool. I've never had someone tell me that they were really excited about having me on, and I had been on their wish list for an interview. So I'm here and I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, well, there's certain people in certain areas, and there's not a whole lot that I have honestly found that talk about finances, to talk about inventory management, to talk about things that you specialize in profit strategy in the e-commerce space in particular. Like there are people I follow, like you can get into the Dave Ramseys and you can get into the Sue Zormans and you get all those people over in just general land, but you specialize in e-commerce. And I think that that's our whole audience. So yeah. Anyone listening, this is probably you, right? But I'd love to kind of take it back. So what kind of led you to really step into this side of it, to step into like the financial management and the inventory management side of it?
Yeah. I think my own painful experiences, which a lot of times that's what happens in life, right? Like we learn a lot through falling down and getting really scraped up. And it's what we do with that. And so I know some things that I wish I would have done differently. I wish I would have known from the beginning of my inventory-based business journey. I know the difference that it made when I finally had someone like myself, a profit strategist, that came into my business life and just showed me and helped me understand. And I just have a compassion for the inventory-based business owner because they're typically very good at their craft. So whatever they make, whatever they sell, they're good at merchandising, they're good at customer service. They're good at their craft, but they feel very inadequate when it comes to anything financial, numbers, which inventory is all numbers. And so they just, there's just a lot of feelings of guilt and shame, confusion. And I want to help people clear that up because I know what it feels like to come out on the other side and have confidence in the foundation of your business. And so that's why I do this. It's not the sexy marketing, some of the topics everyone loves to talk about. Typically, people don't jump to talk about financials or numbers, but yeah. I help make it a little bit more attractive. I hope
it's a little easier on me. I get to talk about like, here's how you take campaigns and start producing, profits, and you start doing this. But then when you dive into most people don't want to talk about their P&Ls. They don't want to, and I think you're right. Like, I never looked at it from there's this shame or there's this guilt.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Sometimes it's the fear of what's my Chase account going to look like when I refresh it or when I log in. And I remember the feeling because we've been in business 10 years, and just like you've done this for a long time. And during your journey, at some point, you start checking your bank account every day, and you have those moments where you're like, do I have enough to for the payroll, for the subscriptions that are coming out, for the inventory I have to buy. And so I love that you are on a mission to help people with that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I want to help them sleep at night.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
Yeah, no, that's great. So before you do what you do now, what's your story before that?
Yeah. So I'm a third generation entrepreneur born and raised in North Dakota, where yes, it gets very, very cold for very many months. So I live in Nashville now. We escaped the winters, but third generation entrepreneur. So I was around small business every Thanksgiving table, every Easter lunch, every Christmas, around the Christmas Eve, like family was talking about business. What's interesting now looking back is they were never talking about what really matters in business, which is what a lot of business owners do, right? Because we think we know, but really it's the numbers, it's the focus on the data and the building a strong foundation. So I wasn't afraid of small business ownership. In fact, that's just what, that's what I'm going to do when I grow up, right? And so I started my first business when I was 13, built that for about a decade. It was a theater company, and then got married, had a couple kiddos. And I was like, I think I'm done with the nonprofit, at nights and weekends. So let's do nights, weekends, and holidays. Let's open retail, right? So I opened a retail store in 2006. And my husband at the time was working for a trucking company that would haul a lot of freight for high-end department stores. They would end up with salvage freight, damage it out, and they had collected all this inventory. And so his boss came to me and said, hey, you have a boutique store. You're selling things. Would you sell these 2 truckloads of off-price liquidation product for me? And so I said yes to the opportunity. So within 6 months, I had 2 different retail concepts open. They were side by side. And the second one was a designer outlet store, which really worked well because we were heading into the recession. People wanted really amazing things for a discounted price. So I ended up merging my 2 concepts and creating an outlet in a boutique environment. When I franchised it, so 2010, franchise, built that, grew it. We had 13 stores around the country. And then when I got out of the franchise space, I ended up selling the brand to one of my last remaining franchisees. I thought, what is all of this for? What's all of this information, all these connections? Like, what's all the learning? What is it all for? And I saw a gap in the industry when it came to the way that small retailers bought product. So typically, in the past, they'd go to market, you buy 6 months ahead of time. Going to market was kind of your claim to fame. Like every boutique owner loved doing that. But the landscape for how people were buying was changing. And so I thought, why not create a subscription box model where we could bring the wholesaler's product right to the retailer's doorstep. So kind of like market in a box. So I built and launched the boutique box, which I sold in 18 months. My goal was to build that and sell it and let someone else do the fulfilling on all of that. I just wanted to solve a problem. I love to solve problems. Solved it. Sold it. But through that, then started meeting all of these small retailers and e-commerce stores, and they were all asking the same questions. How much inventory should we have? Why do I have all these sales on Saturday and by Monday morning, the cash is all gone? What's going on? What is a financial? I don't the same questions over and over. And so then I launched the Inventory Genius method, which helps solve those problems. So that's 20 years and the path of how I got from A to B, I guess.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, at 13, I'm trying to think of what I was doing from 13 to 23. The tail end, I was an entrepreneur, but I think at the beginning, the first 13, I was sleeping until noon and playing video games till like 6 a.m. in the morning. So, wow. And here you are starting a business, going into retail, franchising, selling, building again, selling again. And now you've landed on helping retail and helping e-commerce stores solve this money dilemma and have a better literacy around that then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk. I'd love to talk about the Inventory Genius model because you have a book called Inventory Genius, and you have a podcast too. Isn't it called Inventory Genius Podcast?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you have a podcast. Everybody, go check that out. And you have a book. Now, in the book, is this where you cover the Inventory Genius model?
It is, yes. So the framework that I've created, the Inventory Genius framework, really starts by taking a look at the financials and what they mean in regards to your inventory. So anyone that exchanges things for dollar bills has inventory. Salons have inventory. Coffee shops that sell coffee beans have inventory. Of course, we know traditional retail, traditional e-commerce But a lot of times we don't think about how inventory really plays into the cash that we're keeping or the cash that we're not keeping. And so with the inventory genius method, we start by looking at the P&L and the balance sheet, what those mean in an inventory-based business, how to account for your inventory properly so that you can watch what's happening with cash flow, and then how to structure the way that you find profitability by understanding how the inventory and the margin from that inventory plays into your overall net profit.
Okay. So that's the high level. Now you said something, and I forget where I said this, but I wrote this down, and you said cash and inventory are the same thing. Your inventory is like cash on hangers and cash in boxes, and you need to start thinking about inventory this way.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So
I don't remember where it was. I wrote it
say
down.
it all over the place. So you've probably seen it multiple times. Yeah.
Okay.
I always say cash on hangers, your inventory, cash on hangers, cash in boxes, which honestly, Josh, that is one of the biggest aha moments if I'll do like a masterclass for people who have never really dove into financials. And this could be someone who's doing $5 million a year in revenue or someone who's doing $5,000 a year in revenue. Because we don't think of our inventory this way, we get very emotionally attached to our inventory. If we make it, of course, we think it's the best thing ever in this design and everyone's going to want it. If we buy it and sell it, we think, oh my goodness, I put so much time into this collection and everyone should love this beautiful blue shirt and no one's buying it. And what do I do with it? So we have to start thinking about our inventory as literally cash. And if you had cash shoved in boxes on your shelves and you had cash hung up in your closet, if you saw anyone like that, you'd say, that's so foolish. Why aren't you making your money work for you? You don't even know how much money is shoved in that box. But we do that with our inventory. So if you can start to think about your inventory as your biggest asset, if you're an inventory-based business, and that asset can be turned into cash that can make you more cash, you get very not emotionally attached to it. And then you start to make much wiser decisions.
So how do you like translate that? So like I'm a store, I have all this inventory, it's sitting in the back, and maybe it's the stuff that I thought that everyone wanted and I loved it like my children, but the reality is it was an ugly baby.
Nobody loves it. Yeah.
What do you do?
It's an ugly child. Yeah. So I think just really thinking about, let's take a look at what we have in front of us. We have a table full of jeans, right? So we have 40 pairs of jeans. They're on the table in the back room. They've been sitting there. We've put them out on the shelf. We pulled them off. We put them on the rack. We've pulled them off. Each of those pair of jeans costs us $10. So let's say we have $100 worth of product. So we have 10 pairs of jeans. Each one costs us $10 for easy numbers. So $100 worth that we've invested in those things. If we just let that stuff sit there, it does us no good. In fact, it doesn't appreciate. Inventory gets less and less value. The more times you touch it, the longer you own it. But if we could take that $100 and we could invest it into a bestseller, something that's trending, a newer and different item, then that $100 can become our $300, $400, $500, or it just sits on the back shelf or sits on the back table and doesn't do us any good. So we have to look at individual items, what we've invested in them. I think the other day on one of my master classes, I mentioned like thinking of it like a money tree. Like we truly can grow money if we think of our inventory as seeds, right? We're planting seeds. And if those money trees that we plant don't produce, we need to get rid of them and we need to plant a new tree. We can't let it just sit there, taking up ground, taking up time, and resources.
Then how do you get rid of it?
Get rid of it. I'm very there's different ways to think about things, but I'm like, if it didn't sell, it's not going to start selling. So let's just cash out of it and be done. When I start working with a client and they have a lot of excess inventory, they might really need cash. And we say, oh my goodness, you could liquidate all this inventory. You could get $50,000, pay off this credit card. I know, but I spent $60,000 on it. And so I'm just going to do like 25% off. I'm just going to do like 30 or 40% off. Well, if it didn't sell for the last 90 days, it's not going to start instantly selling now.
Yeah.
And you can mark it down in increments, but then people just see it. It tires even more so, right? So now I've seen it on sale for 60 days and I didn't want it at 20. I don't want it at 30% off. So I'm very much like turn and burn it. If it isn't doing you any good, it's not doing you any good. So even if you paid 10, if you can only get 5 out of it, get the 5 and reinvest that 5 and make yourself 30. Like the longer you hold on to it, the harder the cash flow overall.
That's good. That's good. Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. And I would equate this to e-commerce owners. If you have an email list of a customer database of any kind and you're running, this is a simple promo sprint. You run a 24 to 72 hour flash sale. Boom. Jeans, 50, 60% off, do a crazy thing, liquidate those. I love that. Turn and burn.
And then get smart. Yeah, turn and burn. I'm very much like, let's get rid of it.
Cut the losses.
Stop. Yes.
Yeah.
And you lose money, great, but you're losing money right now. Like, okay, but I spent 25. I don't want to sell it for 20, but you're not making anything at the moment with it sitting on your shelf. So get rid of it, reinvest it, buy smarter.
This is very in line with a lot of my beliefs around advertising, because we teach advertising, and a lot of times we get really emotionally attached to things because we have a certain feeling about it. And so, like, I might spend all this time building this wonderful creative and these ads, and like I think it's the perfect ad, and this is what's going to convert, and it's going to get me the return on ad spend that I need to be profitable and scale and blah blah blah. And then you go spend $500 and you're at break even or below. And then you spend another $500 and you're below break even. So you're upside down on those customers. And then you spend $2,000 and but you just have this like sunk cost that you're like, I know it's just going to turn around. And I know that suddenly people are going to like it and it's going to take off and the algorithm's going to do whatever. We just live on this prayer. And I always like to say, hey, stop living on a prayer. Leave that for Bon Jovi. We gotta move forward and just take the lessons, take the learns and be like, hey, the reality is if I bought all this inventory, these products that aren't selling, it's better to take a small loss on that, recoup that cash, and then leverage that and move with better data, knowing that that's one less thing people want.
Yeah. So when I had my brick and mortar store, I mean, I was constantly observing what was going on. So if I put product on the floor, literally, if it didn't sell in a week, I'm like, okay, there's a reason. No one's tried that on. I'm going to move it, right? So you give it a little bit of time. So I'm going to move it. Maybe it needs to go in the window or go on a different shelf. If still no one's buying it, or everyone tries it on and no one buys it, get rid of it. It's bad. So instead of like, oh my goodness, but I don't know, and it's so pretty and it goes with it, we just need to get ourselves like unemotionally attached to the inventory and move it, and then get really smart about how we rebuy. So if I'm working with a client that has a lot of debt and they're really trying to dig their way out of things, and we do maybe because you can't run a business like this. Like, you're not going to liquidate everything all the time. We have to have the margin, but we know we made some mistakes on some purchases. We liquidated that product. We got some money out of it. Now we have to be really smart. We're not going to make risky buys with that inventory as we're trying to grow our cash back and our profit back. So that's the other piece. If you do a liquidation sale, if you move your inventory below cost or at cost, really smart with those dollars when you reinvest. So don't go buy some next trendy, risky purchase. Buy something that will turn quickly, super high margin, so you can start to build up the cash flow again.
So let's talk about debt. What do you say? Like, what advice do you have to the business owner that's sitting in like a pile of it, right? Like the EIDL comes out and it's like 1%, and then they take $500,000 or they take $100,000 because it's only 1%. And then, by the way, the government came back and said, oh, it's not 1%. It's actually 3.5%. And you have to retroactively pay for all of this. And now it's all kicked in. Like, what advice do you have to someone who is in, like, what strategy do you have to like climb out of that? If you have anything you'd like to share.
Yeah,
I hear that a lot.
love helping a messy situation. that is, problem solving. So let's just dig into the mess. I love it. And working with clients that have a lot of debt, I would say, is one of my specialties, because most often we can fix the situation using the method that I talked about. So that inventory genius method. It's most often the reason an inventory-based business owner is in debt is because of their inventory. But the exciting thing is that if their inventory got them into debt, most likely their inventory can actually get them out of debt. So we start by looking at the top line. What are your sales goals? Where do those come from? Not just, I want to do 100,000 a month, but what are the unit level metrics underneath those? And then we look at what are your margins running right now, so we can see what your gross profit is. Most often I can find a lot of margin points really quickly, and that just drops to the bottom line. And then we look at expenses, like what are you running? What does it cost to run your business? Not with debt, not inventory buys, but just true fixed and non-fixed expenses. And then what are you left with at the end of the day? What is your ultimate net, what's your net profit? Now we look at what is your debt? What service do you have? What do you have to service when it comes to your debt payments? Is the net profit allowing you to cover the debt payments. Most often it's not, is what we find. And so then we just get ourselves into more debt. So we take on debt to actually run the business, which is not good. So I can't make payroll, so I'm going to take that Shopify loan. I can't make, I need more inventory, so I'm just going to put it on credit cards. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes that's getting us into the problem. So we have to dig in and find that root. And then we can look at, okay, now what can we do? What levers can we pull? And there's usually 3 levers that we can pull that can create more net profit. And that's what we use to pay off the debt.
Can I tell you what those levers are from my knowledge here?
Yes.
We can increase sales, decrease expenses, or increase our margin.
You got it.
Yes, I've learned.
You've been hanging out around my stuff for a while. That's good.
I literally had that written down. Okay, that's great. That's good stuff. Sorry to interrupt you.
But you know what's funny?
I felt like a
Everybody
student in class.
No, it's all good. What's interesting though is that I find 99% of the business owners I work with don't think about that. The only lever they think they can pull is increasing sales.
Yeah.
So all they keep doing is just increasing sales, chasing sales. But if you don't understand the problem and where it's coming from, all of the problems just chase the sales. And then you end up with more debt and more issues and less money and bigger sales and more to service. And it's just an ugly hole. So
I don't know if this is what you see, but this is my experience, and this is kind of what I see. Usually the problem is you. The problem is the business owner who can't control themselves. And what happens is you hit 2020 and 2021, and then you ride this $1 trillion injection of cash. And so sales are easy and you're cushy, and then you go get really fat as a business. And then things aren't cushy. And now the real entrepreneurs have to rise up and say, oh, now we have to figure out this whole marketing thing. But we've already created this new baseline of wild amounts of expenses. And that's what I did in my business. Like when you have these huge months, you can't control yourself, and you go and you buy expensive softwares, and you start trying to be aggressive, and you go get this warehouse, or you go get this storefront space that you don't really need because you only sell online, but it sounds nice to have. And you're so right. They chase the sales, and I'm on that end because I teach advertising and marketing.
Yeah.
So that's what I help do. But there is this underlying problem of like, if your sales keep increasing, but you don't fix the underlying problem in behavior, you're just going to ascend. It's kind of like income creep, or what do they call it?
Well, I talk about
lifestyle creep, where you creep your lifestyle up as your income goes up, and then you never create that margin and buffer in your life.
Yeah. In my book, I talk about the children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. That's how I ran my business, right?
Yeah.
So you give them a cookie, then they need milk. And then if they have milk, then they need this. And then if they have that, and I give the literal illustration of, I needed a forklift, but then I had to hire someone to drive it. And then I needed someone to manage the person who drove it. And then I needed a bigger warehouse because now I can, and so we just keep chasing all of these things instead of figuring out, like, do I actually need these expenses? Is my margin in line? Can I be focusing on the hard work instead of just the busy work?
Yeah. And I couldn't, that's a great book and analogy for this. 100%. And I think that it takes getting to this point in your business where like you finally are bounded in debt, or you're just in a hole, and then there's debt on top of you and it's piling you, and you have like $3 in your bank account and you have payroll to make that next Friday. It takes kind of getting into those situations. Like a lot of times we have to get to those situations. Those of us like me that had those problems, you get to those situations, and then that's when you have to realize you have to change. And I'm a fan of being unbelievably lean. It's like, oh, we need to hire a copywriter. No. We're going to challenge ourselves and figure out, can we get ChatGPT this year to basically fulfill our copywriter role, even though we don't know how to use it yet. And I think that you have to start thinking from that standpoint of you have to live on less than you make, which is a crazy concept.
Yeah. And right now business is expensive to run. Business is very expensive to run. So you have to stay as lean and mean as possible. The margins have to be as plush as they possibly can be. And sometimes, I'll get resistance. Well, I can't mark my product up any more than I already do. Okay, we can still find margin. There's other ways to find margin other than just marking it up. Or I'll challenge a client to tell me why you think you can't. Is it because you're afraid that the neighbor has it cheaper. Like there's lots of things we tell ourselves as to why we can't fix the issue. But you're right. We have to get to a place where the pain is so great that we're willing to do the right work to fix it. And then we have to commit to that, because a lot of people are interested in doing the right work and they're interested in getting out of debt, very interested, but they're not committed to what that's going to look like.
So if we just peel back the onion a little, just on the debt, one final question I would have. So like, let's say at the end of the month, I have $5,000 in net profit after owner's comp and all that good stuff. I have like $5K left over. What would you do with that if I had $100,000 in like a loan between Shopify and credit cards and whatever? I have $100,000 in debt. Do you believe in lobbing it all on it? Do you believe in sitting in a retained earnings position and kind of splitting it out? Like, what would you do if that was my scenario?
So I like to always get rid of capital loans first. They are cash eating monsters. They take money right off the top, and it's very hard to control the business when you can't control your cash. So I've done whiteboard examples and like shown clients, okay, so you made $10,000 this week, but you have a 17% capital loan. So they're going to take 17% right off the top. Then you have a 50% margin or 60% margin. You're already in a really bad position before you even have to pay for the business, and then you have nothing left. So I try to attack those capital loans first so that you can control your cash again. And then sometimes I'll suggest to clients, look at consolidating debt. So they might have lots of credit cards, 10 different credit cards, 29% interest, all these little payments they're trying to do all over the place. Again, from a cash flow perspective, if we can have as least amount of debt payments as possible, and we know when those are occurring, so a capital loan, they just pull it from you, you have no control. If we can say, okay, we have 2 loan payments a month, here's the amounts, we can budget it in, that's a great place to start. And then just, that snowball effect of taking off the highest interest, yuckiest loan first. Debt is not a bad thing. Like a line of credit for an inventory-based business, if you use it properly, is great. I mean, the way that you're supposed to use it, you buy the inventory as it sells, you pay off the line of credit with the inventory margin. I mean, that's great. And you can self-fund, so you can create your own inventory account, which is one of the things I teach. Eventually, you build that up, and then you use that inventory account along with a buying budget, and those two things can give you really good bumpers. So it's not that debt is bad. It's how did we get ourselves into debt? Why are we in debt? What are we using the debt for? Are we being smart with our money? Those are the questions to ask.
So as we're kind of coming into, and thank you for that, as we're kind of coming into the holidays, I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about maybe forecasting, because I put this out in our community and I was kind of like, hey, I'm interviewing Ciara. What questions do you have? And I had questions. I'm not going to read them all off, but I wanted to just ask at least one or two of these because as we kind of go into the holidays, Q4 is where most people just cash in, right? This is where we can make or break the remainder of the year. And so as we're kind of stepping into that, like, do you have any good forecasting frameworks to help like prepare for that?
Yeah. So I would definitely use the open to buy formula. If anyone Googles it, there's a lot of different variations. I use the most simple form in most everything I do. So I'm going to give you the simple form here, which is just to take your sales goal and then add it to the inventory amount that you want to keep on hand. So if you're e-commerce, what is that inventory dollar amount that you want to always have? If you're brick and mortar, what do you need to have in inventory stock? And then you subtract what you're starting with, and that's going to give you your available open to buy. So you can forecast the inventory you're going to need based off of the sales goals. That's why it's all really important. As I work through the framework with clients, you can't just focus on margin, or you can't just focus on top line revenue, or you can't even just focus on net profit. It all works together, those 5 components on a profit and loss. And so you have to have the sales goals as the basis for everything, and then back into that. And the same thing is with, forecasting what you're going to need in inventory. What's your goal? What's your goal for the overall business? What's your goal by category? What's your goal by brand? And then you can just kind of continue to dive into that and then build out the projected inventory you would need for that. Also taking into account, do I want any left at the end? Is this a seasonal item? Things like that.
That's actually really great. I think the hard part that some people might be thinking is like, maybe you hit it and then you start to liquidate the inventory. We had a lot of clients last year that, of course, I'll brag on us. Like we have great advertising systems. And so they implement those and then they sell out and it's like December 7th. And it's like, it's a good problem to have, but it's a frustrating problem. There's always this idea that you can always do more. And I think it's just the internal voice in so many of our heads. Like we can always make more, right? There's always going to be that. So I love how you reverse engineer that, starting with the sales goal, the end in mind, because if you hit that, that's a huge win. Like if that's the goal, it's probably above what your run rate is. Like there's a growth component of that you're planning for. And if you hit it, that's a great win. Let's sit in the win and revel in that rather than beat ourselves up and say, oh, I could have done more. I love that.
And that's something interesting too, just kind of a little sidebar there. I get this question a lot. So I sell out of something. It's great. Should I buy it again? You know, people ask because we get a little greedy, right? So we have these things and we're like, well, should I buy it again? And then we buy it again and then none of it sells this next time around. And then we're stuck with it. So then we really didn't make profit on the overall purchase. So I like to say with things like that, if it's something that doesn't have a shelf life and you always need, keep it in stock. So do an open to buy weekly. We had a couple categories in my store where like basics. I never wanted to run out. So every week I was buying into it. But things that had a shelf life, high fashion, seasonal, buy it, get the margin, sell it out. Awesome. Great. Now take that money and reinvest it in something else that you need for the next season or the next month instead of, oh, I hope that I can sell as many again. Don't get greedy with that profitability. Like you said, sit in that win and then, make notes, understand next year, maybe you order 25% more or whatever that might be. So it's a good thing to bring up.
That's good. Well, I really appreciate you hanging out with me, Ciara. I do have one question for you. Well, two. One is, what's one impactful book that you have read that you would recommend everybody listening read?
I think most recently, The Gap and the Gain. So I am a 3 on the Enneagram. I'm a 10. If you've ever done the Colby test, I'm a 10 quick start, which is the highest, meaning like I can start over every day, all the time. Which is what I love, solving problems. Like they energize me. The problem with that can be that I never celebrate a win and I'm always looking for what's next. So I hit a goal and then I'm like, okay, what's next? That's awesome. Good for me. What's next? And The Gap and the Gain really helped me understand why I think that way and that it's most important to live in the gains we've made, look back at where we've come from instead of always looking at how much more we have to do. So I think most of your listeners are probably high achievers. They're entrepreneurs. So that might be a good read for them.
I love that. And there's only one other book. Everybody, you need to go get Inventory Genius. Use your inventory to create more profit and keep more cash by Ciara Stockeland. You can grab it on Amazon. And one final question. So where can we all connect with you at?
Yeah, so you can just head over to my website, ciarastockeland.com. My podcast is linked there. The book's linked there. Lots of free resources. I'd love to do a profit strategy call with any of you who are interested in getting a little inventory help. Or you can follow me on Instagram, Ciara Stockeland. I'm pretty active over there too.
Ciara is really active, way more active than I. I need to take a page out of your book because she posts so much stuff all the time. Hey, everybody. You've been listening to the Ecommerce Alley podcast produced by Dylan Counts. And Ciara and I want to say thank you for listening. Thanks for hanging out, whether you're watching on YouTube. If not, and you're listening, check it out on YouTube sometime. It's more visual. It's a little bit more fun. But we will see you in the next episode.